We're in my office. We'll do a quickie on this one, or an afternoon delight. We'll call it an afternoon delight. So I'm several hours early because I cannot sleep. I've been having for the last few months like just unbelievable insomnia, and even when I take something to help me sleep, it's just not really doing much. Getting like 2 hours at a time, an hour at a time, and then I'm just up. And it doesn't help last night that all the Philadelphia sports teams that played all took a dump. So I got to work this morning at 11. I don't even have to be here for another 3 hours now. But I was just getting kind of paperwork done and getting invoices set up and all this kind of stuff. Just doing prep work for the weekend. And as I was skimming through streaming, I found a movie which I had wanted to see and I never got a chance to. And it's on Pluto TV, which I also never really use, but that one works on the office computer here. And it's called Street Gang, and it's about how Sesame Street came to be. I don't know how often I've ever talked about my love for Jim Henson. He's one of my heroes. It's up there. He's up there with like a Mr. Rogers or something like that. Somebody who was able to use their creativity and their kindness to teach people and to, to leave the world a better place than they found it. So being that I was born in 1981, Sesame Street was still in that golden era in that time, and I was able to come up with Sesame Street. Mr. Rogers was still a thing, but Nickelodeon had just kicked off as well. So I grew up with things like Pinwheel and Today's Special, and You Can't Do That on Television and stuff like that. There was that we grew up in that era of infotainment in a much different way than it is now. Whereas I never really saw these things as teaching me a lesson. You always had sitcoms that would be like, oh, a very special episode, and it would have a lesson. But in these, it was like you were learning with these characters who you loved, and you were being entertained, and through that entertainment, the message stuck with you. ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, colors, shapes, all that kind of stuff was things that I knew at a young age because family members would be pushing it on us. But there was more so the reason that these things stick with me was the idea of empathy and acceptance and being a team player and right and wrong and all that kind of stuff. Like these were the lessons that still ring true to me from my time watching Sesame Street as a kid, and why those things were so important in it. And it's weird even now looking at it and watching this documentary, you get a little bit more into why the show came to be. They wanted something because so many kids watch television, and the education system was so bad, especially in like lower income areas. They needed something where they could educate kids, but in a way that is entertaining to where, it has cultural significance. And you look at it now and you go like, oh yeah, I never thought about the Muppets as puppets. I a couple years ago, myself and my producer friend, we were at Chiller Theater up in North Jersey, and they had some of the original puppets there, and Big Bird's full costume and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember like breathing heavy being around it, because it's like, yeah, it's a big piece of foam and felt and feathers and all this kind of stuff, and it's not real, but it's there, and it is real though. Like when I was a kid, I knew what a Muppet was. I knew that Frank Oz's hand was under there, but they always seemed real to me. Even now, as an adult, like you see these things and you go like, oh, that's Kermit, and there's something very magical and whimsical about that. The people who created Sesame Street were able to find a way to educate kids, because the kids don't want to learn, if they don't have to, they want to have fun, and this is a way to have fun. And you have these blue and green and yellow creatures, and they felt like they were just as real as the human characters on Sesame Street. And even that, thinking about like the people who played those parts, it's like kind of having like a TV news person. We have Philly Channel 6 Action News had like the same news people since I was a kid. And I remember meeting one of them. He came into my theater when I worked in Wayne, and it was because it's somebody who's in your house every day. Growing up, I always watched the 6 o'clock news, the 5 o'clock news, whatever, um, and you know, or you would watch like the 10 o'clock news before you went to bed when you were in school and stuff like that. And you would see these people, the sportscasters, the weather people, the main broadcasters and stuff like that. And I remember meeting this guy, and it would have been like meeting Steven Spielberg. You know, it was somebody who feels as close to you as a family member, but you don't know them, but they're in your house every day. So they're bigger than that. They're bigger than a TV character, you know. That's kind of how I felt about the Sesame Street characters. You know, Oscar and Bert and Ernie and all this kind of stuff. Like they're real. They're real little kids, and when they still have an ability when we see them now to have a power over us. And I remember just being like really moved seeing the Big Bird costume, and it's not something I think about very often is Sesame Street, but it is such a huge part of my life. Like there's so many little skits and animated pieces and songs that, you know, stick with me to this day. And so this documentary was really sweet, very eye-opening. I didn't know that the original Gordon's daughter is Holly Robinson Peete, who was an 80s actress, but then she married Rodney Peete, who was a quarterback in the NFL. And her father, who was the original Gordon, was kind of the black Johnny Carson in Philadelphia, and he had a show. And the show, the cool thing about Sesame Street in 1969, all the way up until, you know, when I've fallen out of it, you know, and my brother's kids watched it and stuff like that, and it was still part of it. And I'm, you know, it's still on, but you know, I never really understood like the Elmos and all that kind of stuff, because that was after my time. But it was cool to see how they bring in 1969. They're bringing together people from different minorities and sexes and economic backgrounds, and putting them all together in this thing. And it's like these are the people in your neighborhood. You know, the people that you meet when you're walking down the street. And I thought that was really cool, and it was a way for kids to see people like them who aren't, you know, white kids. You know, I always get mad at that about, you know, it's like I got everything. Like I got to be every character if I was playing something. A lot of my friends who were black and Hispanic and Asian, they had a very small window of characters they were able to identify with. So nowadays when everybody say, oh, it's gone woke or whatever, it's like, no, it's always kind of been that way. You know, I think it's a little bit more misguided now. I think it's more of a showy kind of thing. It's like, oh, well, this character is whatever just for the sake of it being whatever, instead of it being a fully fleshed out character or a way to identify kids with seeing themselves on screen. And I think in a lot of that, we kind of lost the pureness of it. But again, that could be just me as a white dude just saying that. But yeah, this documentary was really sweet. I still get choked up when I see them explaining to Big Bird about Mr. Hooper's death. I remember watching that when it happened, you know, and then I remember watching Jim Henson's funeral on television. And you know, but yeah, I don't know. I'm glad I watched this. I'm glad I finally found it. It's one of those things where, like, I don't have kids. I'll never have kids. But I learned a lot of shit from puppets when I was young that still sticks with me to this day. Like being a good person, being a good neighbor, you know, accepting people for, you know, knowing it's not easy being green. There's something beautiful about that. And there's something about that, you know, Jim Henson's been dead since 1990, but he's immortal because those characters they created, Oscar the Grouch and Bert and Ernie and Big Bird and Snuffleupagus and all that, they're going to live forever. And the voices that are coming out of Frank Oz and out of Jim Henson, like, they're going to be in my head forever. You know, the Rainbow Connection is it's from the Muppets. It's one of my favorite things ever. It was written by Paul Williams, who is in Fans with a Paradise. But the ending of the Muppet movie is life's like a movie, write your own ending, keep believing, keep pretending, we did just what we set out to do, the lovers, the dreamers, and you. And those are words that I live by. Man, I saw that movie on video. I wasn't old enough to see it in the theater. I saw The Great Muppet Caper and Muppets Take New York and stuff like that, but they're just these words of you know, accepting and dreaming and friendship and kindness and all the shit that we need more of in the world right now that we just don't have any of. And I'm very glad that I grew up on Sesame Street and I grew up on Mr. Rogers. I've been to, you know, I remember going as a little kid going to Sesame Place, which is a Sesame Street theme park in Pennsylvania. And I still have a picture of my cousin and I. We're in this fake bathtub, the rubber ducky bathtub, with Ernie, and you know, it's cool to see that. And the very first movie that I ever remember seeing in the theater, like that I have like vivid memories of seeing in the theater, was Follow That Bird, the Sesame Street movie. So yeah, this is a great documentary. It kind of refilled, you know, a good portion of why I can't sleep anymore is the world's on fire, and everyone is fucking terrible to each other, and the stupidest, loudest people seem to be the ones who are getting the most out of life these days. And you look back at something like this where a bunch of people at one particular time all lent their talents to the betterment of the future. You know, the betterment of making kids be better neighbors, better people. And there's something so fucking magical about that, and heartbreaking as well when you look at, you know, the show started in 1969. You know, as America was falling apart, and you realize that 2025 America's still falling apart, man. Nothing really ever changes. We're always at each other's throats, and we're always, you know, I don't care what your political beliefs are, I don't care what your whatever is, it's like everybody kind of tends to be out for themselves or out for people who are like them, instead of looking around their neighborhood and like trying to be better for the fucking future. Because I'm getting to a point where I don't think there's going to be a future, you know, but I see this and I look back at it and it fills me with such wonderful memories of being a kid and remembering sitting on the sofa or sitting on the carpet at my mom's house or at my grandparents' house or aunts and uncles' houses and watching, you know, Sesame Street or anything. I was by the time Barney came out, I was already old. You know, and just how those people were able to change the world. And if even just in a guy like me to be like, you know, sharing or you know, being nice to people who are different than you and stuff, then they did their job, you know, and there's still little Sesame Street things from songs and all that I remember to this day and will still reference. And yeah, it's a really, really, really good documentary. It's on Pluto TV. It's called Street Gang, and it's all about how, you know, Sesame Street was pitched, how Jim Henson came along, and the progression that it took from there. You know, one of the best performances ever is Superstition by Stevie Wonder on Sesame Street, you know, or James Taylor on Sesame Street, or something like that. Like I remember, you know, Paul Simon on Sesame Street. I remember all of these things, and I remember, you know, and like seeing the human characters and stuff like that. Like I've seen them at conventions, and it blows my mind that it's like, oh my god, there they are, you know, and or seeing the puppets, oh my god, there they are, you know, and I know that they're not real. You know, it's like you go to a convention, you see like a full-size R2-D2, and you're like, I know that's not really R2-D2, because I know R2-D2 doesn't exist, but that thing that I love so much and is so important to me is physical. It's physical, and it's right in front of me right now, and that's how I felt when I turned that corner and saw the Big Bird suit, because it's just like, wow, like, forget that, oh, that's the one that the guy is inside, like, a puppeteer, whether it be Frank Oz, whether it be, you know, Carol Spenny, who was Big Bird, or you know, Jim Henson, or any of the people who did, the guy who's Elmo, who got in trouble with a kid, he was also Master Splinter in the first Ninja Turtle, but, like, just the idea of someone, you know, bringing to life this inanimate thing with their hand and the amount of personality that goes into it. Our friend Ben does puppets, and he's so fucking talented, and I could never do something like that, but it's such an unbelievable talent to imbue this piece of felt with so much life that, you know, it just moving as a song sings is something that I still remember to this day. And there's, again, it's magical. It's very, it's beautiful and it's special. And I do hope that, you know, I do hope that someday people go like, oh yeah, we can get a lot done if we just work together, you know? If we all just act like fucking neighbors. And I know that's some kumbaya shit to sing, and, you know, and I get why people don't like each other, and I understand, you know, people othering others and all that kind of stuff, but watching this documentary, my heart was just so filled, and I'm, but also, like, with sadness as well, because it's like, the path is right there. You know, the path is there to teach people how, kids, to grow up to be good people, black, white, straight, gay, trans, whatever, you know, at a young age, somebody said, you're not going to like everybody you ever go to school with or work with, but you got to still figure out a way to work with them. And that's the thing that makes me so sad, is that I feel like people don't think that they need to anymore, you know, and I don't care how racist you are, whatever, the people you don't like aren't going anywhere. You know, so if we could all just fucking find some common ground to work together, things would be sweet. Well, that's it. My phone's ringing. Bye. SesameStreet.com.